Newsfirst Newsline with Faraz Shaukatali.
And a very good morning to you. This is Newsline, live from the Newsfirst studios in Dawson Street in Colombo, and of course broadcasting on TV1. And joining us this morning is Mr. Krishma Wanasuriya, that legal expert who tends to come here from time to time, and he's here this morning, and we hope to discuss professional negligence. Very good morning to you, Mr. Wanasuriya.
Good morning, Faraz. Thank you for asking me again, and good to be here.
And do you like the set?
Lovely, lovely. As I walked in, that's one thing I noticed. Like a bit like Larry King live with the microphone
No.
and suspenders.
Oh, gosh, that's right. That's because, we need to hold things up.
Yeah.
Now then, how are things holding up in terms of professional Sri Lanka? What are there rules that govern professional negligence? If you see doctors, patients going in there totally unhappy coming out, and so on?
Yeah, interesting point to discuss for us. I think before we get to professionals being negligent, you need to discuss the large disparity that exists in our country between professions and the service user or the end user, the citizen. You see, you and I have both traveled around. We've lived and worked, practiced in other countries. There, in a developed world, the setting between a professional and the user is not that wide. For example, a client would say, if it's for legal services, a client would be able to question me, why did you do this? So why aren't we going to that court? So why did you say that in court? But I have heard it being said in several times in Sri Lanka. In Sinhalese, of course, do you know the law? Well, are you the lawyer? Am I the lawyer?
That's the attitude.
That's the attitude. Now, for example, if a doctor were to say, did you come here to give me medicine, or will you just take what I give and go? Now, that just shows the sheer contempt with which you're handling your customer. Also, the fact that you feel some alleged sense of superiority that you assumed upon yourself.
Yes, wonderful word that.
Yes. That I know everything, and this man doesn't. So we need to first bridge that gap to the level where the consumer or the service provider would ask the end user, the customer, the citizen, on whose behalf, who actually pays the bill for that professional. Remember, in our country also, for the professional to have studied, possibly, like those of us who went to local universities here and got a degree, our first degree from a local university, as I did, several other professionals did. Actually, we owe much more than what they are paying us when they come to us. We owe much more of a sense of gratitude, because it's at their cost that we have educated ourselves also. So we need to keep that in mind when we treat our customers. So I think you need to bridge that gap. And as soon as you bridge that gap, then you bring these two persons in par with one another. Like you and I are now talking. You need to be able to give a comfort zone to that patient or the customer, in my case, or the client that walks into my chamber, that you are equal to me. We are having a discussion here. It's your rights or your illness that's at stake here.
Yeah.
Now, we can't do that until we educate the masses on this. You see, that is why I say we need to continuously keep on insisting that we educate the masses on what their rights are.
Would you? That's an interesting point that you talk of, Krishna. And would you say that there is a need, at least, to have one half an hour lesson or an hour's lesson, one lesson a month at least, in schools about the law, for right from the beginning, for simple things, to inculcate this thing in our minds that we must respect the law and we must know the law. There's no good a policeman stopping one car for crossing a white line and then letting three other cars, albeit high-end, one Range Rover, one a sort of a Prado type, and another Land Rover, flying past, and when the driver says to the policeman, well, what about them? Is there a different law for them? And then this chap says you need to get your heads examined, your eyesight examined, and dismisses this because he's unable to stop these so-called big vehicles. There's a policeman in Bandarban, I think, and he's called, what's he called? Parachute something. Apparently, his forte is that the bigger the car, the greater the chance of him writing a ticket. And, kudos to him. Well done,
Well done to him.
Indeed.
And also don't you think, going back to your question, we will come to the traffic in a minute, but going back to your question, maybe you'd want to elevate that just to beyond just the law, civic duty.
That's it.
And civic rights as well.
Yeah.
You follow? Law alone, I don't think law alone will give this confidence to the citizen that they are in fact a citizen with rights.
Yeah.
You follow? Now, for example, take some parts of the developed world, or what they call developed. But the citizen seems to be aware that I am powerful, that the power to run the state lies with me. Although we keep on saying this at public fora like this, we need to get the message out that civic empowerment, that not just the knowledge of the law, but the fact that I am a citizen of this country and I have rights. You follow? Now that goes, for example, go beyond what our rights are. Article 28D of our Constitution says that every citizen has a duty, a positive duty cast upon them to combat misuse, corruption, abuse.
Well done.
How many of us know that?
But actually it says, I just want to correct you slightly here, because I love Article 28D. And it says, all those in Sri Lanka.
Yes.
It makes no reference to citizens.
No, but
the point here I'm trying to make is that foreigners too have that responsibility.
Precisely.
And these foreigners may include such people as who have been imported to run something sensitive as the Central Bank of Sri Lanka.
Right. Now, before we get to your pet subject, Mr. James Bond, can we go back to your earlier point, a very valid point, is on the traffic. Now, recently we saw the present government coming out with some very healthy road discipline rules, and all of us accept that we need some sort of discipline on our roads, because sometimes we have no choice but to drive erratically because everyone else is driving left. But now having brought these rules in, what did we finally end up doing? Some persons went out on a strike, particularly those persons who, and I'm not saying this just as a user of a car. I have used public transport. I have gone to school in public transport, and still I try, as I said sometime back to you all, I try at least once a month to take my children by public transport just to show them that there is public transport. Now, those very people who break the law most of the time went out on a strike. And what did some responsible government ministers come out and say? No, don't worry, we have brought this regulation, but that won't be effective for another year or so, so why you being worried? Is that the message that you want to get out there?
But don't you think that this rule and increasing the fine to several times more, to 25,000 in this case, would have been, is good, but I think they missed one vital component, and that is that they should have made the fines for drivers of public service vehicles where there are fare-paying passengers going in those vehicles. That means vans and buses and coaches. I think that those fines should have been proportionately more. They should have been something like 100,000.
But then for us, the argument would be that there is inequality. You can't have laws operating inequally among citizens.
Yes, but the point is, Krishma, when I say this, you see, it's not like one driver in a car with a maximum of 4 people, right? The driver plus 4.
But
then you see, then that's one driver with 4 people. Here we're talking about one driver with about minimum 52 people on board.
You can bring in, perhaps thinking out of the box. I haven't done research into it, but maybe an expert can come out with a system where you increase the types of offences.
Yeah.
The types of offences where you're carrying more passengers,
right,
and that sort of thing. But you can't impose a fine or a levy and say this is this much for so and so, because there is inequality in operation.
Yes, but
someone
however,
can challenge it.
yes, but however, when we go to sit for our driving test, there is a higher standard to get a PSV a public service vehicle
Of
license.
course, of course.
Therefore,
so which is why I said,
yes.
we can look at certain regulations where the offence is maximized or the offence is increased when you are not just dealing with yourself and maybe a private passenger,
Yeah.
but public passengers or public transport.
Yeah.
We can vary the kinds of offences.
Indeed.
But I'm just talking of a penalty or a penalty that's charged.
Yeah.
You can't unequally apply. Anyway, I think we've dealt on that point now.
Yes.
But can I just go back to your earlier point of professionalism?
Yes.
And others coming here and expecting professionalism.
Yeah.
That's a very valid point. If we are to get Sri Lanka to where we want it to go,
Indeed.
if we want to make this a commercial hub as we continue to be
Dream of.
we hear it all the time. We hear it all the time,
Yeah.
ad nauseum at times. So if we want to get there, we need to also impress upon those, perhaps not just Sri Lanka, others who are trying to use our services here, that we are professional.
Right.
Now take our public services, for example, for us, I keep on saying that our public servants have now thought they're government servants and they're serving the government of a day. But gone are the days of a public servant who stood upright and told the minister, no, this is not right, this is what is correct and I will follow the law. But leave that aside. Now, as you know, long time ago when the Thatcher government came in the UK, what did they immediately do? They wanted to revamp the public services to make it more, they said that the consumer, the citizen is the king.
Yeah.
How do we provide for this consumer?
Yeah.
So not just the private sector, they brought in levels of professionalism to the public service. For example, the hospitals, they said if you treat this amount of patients and if you have this amount of treatments done for this month, then we are going to give you a mark, a charter mark.
Yeah.
You follow, a royal charter. And so that gives then there are incentive schemes for public servants to achieve, say people giving licenses, this amount if you do, we are going to recognize you. Now that sort of thing needs to come in. Now we know private sector does it to get their employee of the month, that sort of thing. Public sector also we need to get there. If we are to give the proper service to the citizen, the consumer, we need to think out of the box, not just as parliamentarians increasing the salaries every day and the perks every day. We need to think of what have we come to do. All of us got out on a road and made a new government to make it beneficial for the people, not for some 225 parliamentarians seated there. You see, so I see very little filtering down to the common people that made this government, rather than their bellies getting fatter by the day.
That's true. But do we have enough rules in place? Like you say before, the gap between the professional and the client, the people, is so...
I don't think so. Let's talk of my profession for the moment. Now say we practiced in other areas of the world. What do? As a client walks in, we are supposed to send them a client care letter. As they walk out, the client gets a letter. If we have a consultation, we are supposed to write down what we consulted on, what we discussed, send them to it, document. These are regulated. Then fees are regulated. The number of...
Are they?
Yeah, they are regulated. What a QC can charge, what a pupil barrister's fees are, what a middle-level barrister's fees are, they are all regulated. And what can you charge an hour, what can you charge in terms of transport, waiting time, travelling time, they are all regulated. Now, we need to get to a system. I'm talking about my profession. Medical negligence is the same thing. Or other professions is the same thing. There are strict rules, guidelines, regulations, ethics that govern the conduct of profession. Just because you become a professional and get a certificate on your wall doesn't mean that the sky is the limit. There is a way that in which you are expected to conduct yourself.
I was following a case recently. I'm not going to mention names, obviously, but it was a high-profile case. The asset value of that group was placed at around 6 billion rupees, and these lawyers have obviously made some sort of mistake and filed it under different section, and so it's been thrown out technically. So now the client is going to have to pay again.
No, that's once again. See, I mean, some of us have been shouting for it. There was something called the Lord Woolf reforms, or the Woolf reforms in England, where things like this. Now, today this happens. If the application is filed wrong and it's the lawyer's fault, the whole case goes out and the entire litigation has to start again. But to the civil procedure in England in the year 2000, around 2000, Woolf reforms did this, tackled this very problem. Even they had this problem, where procedural rules were overcoming the actual intended objective of litigation. What did they do? Through the reforms, they said, okay, if a wrong application comes to the wrong court, the judge has a right to, on the bench, ask the parties, do you all agree that this must change? Okay,
and also they change it to the right.
Make the change. All right, now carry on with the case. And things like that made it more, because why should the litigant suffer
Absolutely.
for the mistake of, and this is why
Absolutely.
for us there is professional indemnity insurance in the United Kingdom. And
Do we have that here?
We don't.
Oh, never.
Absolutely. There are lawyers.
That's crazy.
Lawyers have to insure and make sure there are chambers, and if it's a solicitor, then their firm has an indemnity insurance for you.
Yeah.
Say, if you come to me and I make a mistake, you have the right to sue me for getting.
So are you telling
let
me?
finish. You have the right to sue me for getting my act wrong, for
Yeah.
filing the wrong case, and then the indemnity insurance is supposed to cover that. You follow?
Yeah.
We need to get to some place where the citizen of this country can go and challenge his lawyer, challenge the doctor and say, you gave me wrong treatment, or you filed the wrong case for me, now pay up.
Well, that's astonishing. So you mean to say that lots of people in this country make use of private hospitals because they feel that they're getting a better service and so on, and these doctors are not professionally indemnified?
I am not qualified to talk of the doctors and what the private hospitals do. Maybe they have some sort of insurance scheme.
But you're
I
talking
am
about
not
the
aware of it.
legal.
I'm talking the legal profession.
Right.
But I do not know, because how many people for us actually end up suing a top hospital? I don't want to mention names
No,
because some of
that's
our
right.
friends are CEOs of the hospital.
Yes, yes.
How many people have the capacity to go to a commercial court or the
Exactly,
district court
because
and
that-
Islamabad, sue a top hospital chain?
Because it goes back to that business about the professional
The
and
hospital
customer.
will go and retain the highest paid president's counsel in the country,
Yeah.
and that poor litigant will end up with a lawyer
Do
from
we know who that is?
from a legal aid unit, perhaps just taken his oaths or
Yeah.
her oaths,
Yeah.
and there is nothing in the court to even fight. They will take up an 101 preliminary objections, like you say, that the application is filed wrong, this letter is wrong, and the whole case will be thrown out, and that poor litigant would have now ended up losing a son or a daughter in the hospital,
Yeah.
dead.
Yeah.
Then now they have come to file and get damages.
Yeah.
That poor man will now have to sell the house to go and litigate against his big hospital. I mean, it's a crazy system. We have to do something about it. Once again, I say, we send legislators to parliament to legislate for these things.
Yeah.
But what do they go and do? Instead of legislating, they are legislating for themselves about
Well-
increase of the salaries and how many vehicles they can get.
And the 100,000 a month.
And the 100,000. What, this is absolute ridiculous for us. Someone
it's
recently
complete trash, isn't
calculated.
it?
Yeah. About 500,000, it comes to around 500,000 a month package. What's the qualification they have to get that? I mean, surely we had to go to universities, go abroad, study. I don't think still we making half the amount that these fellows make just by sitting there. But I mean, it's
Actually,
absolute disaster.
a viewer posed a question earlier as to how can we expect professionalism when our legislators are apparently unaware of the law themselves.
Most of them appear to be. Otherwise, His Excellency the President couldn't recently say no. I have also heard of people violating road rules and going on the road. Now, please, His Excellency the President is telling the Inspector General of Police to report to me if any of my ministers or members of Parliament are violating the law. I mean, this is ridiculous. They should be the very ones, and also for us, they should.
But that's the way the culture is.
But
isn't it?
no, but we need to change that for us. Now, see, public transport was a question earlier, correct?
Yes.
If we enhance our public transport system, I mean, we have also gone to courts and studied in other countries. No, legislators. Now, for example, let's talk of London because both of us know that. Say, the Temple station where we get off to go to the Royal Courts of Justice, just before that is a Westminster station. How many legislators, parliamentarians get off and they come by public transport to Parliament?
Yeah.
The legislators go in a train to Parliament. And the mothers, the lady legislators who have little children have a creche in Parliament to look after the little children. The lady legislators walk up, bring the child from the school and keep them in the creche and they finish the parliamentary work.
But we don't have such young legislators. We may
But
have
Faraj,
one.
don't you think this vast disparity between our fellows trying to be superstars and travelling in 5 vehicles on the road, pushing all of us aside, and in other countries in the developed world where you are actual public servant, you are serving the public, they use the public if we enhance our public transport system, how many vehicles can we avoid coming to the city?
I must take this question. It's a statement more than a question from a viewer. He's saying, or she, in other words, the lawyers, as he says, are rascals and only motivated by money.
I would not say that of all lawyers. I don't want to defend myself. I also charge fees. I must be very honest with you.
Yeah.
I charge fees because I also have family to feed, 2 young children to send to school.
Yes.
But you can be reasonable in what you do.
Right.
So I wouldn't say that all lawyers are rascals. It's up to you, the citizen. Just like I'll post the question back to you. Many people say that politicians are rascals, but you keep on voting them back into power.
No, but that's
hang on. Similarly, if you feel some lawyer is a rascal, don't vote to him.
Right.
There are several other lawyers who are equally good. So avoid the rascals from coming to a position where you are depending on that rascal.
Yeah. Actually, I want to ask you this. You see, for the people to be able to choose, it's a fundamental flaw in the system, because it is the parties who nominate people. So when you get your Chandakole and you've got to choose, well, you know, you've got to choose from what they put forward. So we need a fundamental change.
That's a violation of democracy, in my opinion. We need to get to a system where there is intra-party democracy in our country.
That's right.
All these big parties, for us, that's the trump that they hold in their hand.
Correct.
You appease the head of the party, or you play ball to the tune I tell you, and I will put you in a nomination paper.
Well, that is how
Hillary and Obama had to fight inside the Democratic Party for Obama to get his nomination 8 or 9 years ago, if you remember correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So inside the party also, not just outside. Inside the party, you have to come up and show your potential and go for a vote for the party members to elect who's going to contest on our behalf.
Yeah.
We need to have that. Now, kissing goes by favor. If you're good with the party leader, so and so.
Well, that might explain how certain people are continue to lead their parties in spite of several electoral defeats, around 24 in all levels of electoral platforms, and how on earth they manage to stay there and yet have the gall to come to that hallowed place called the Parliament and lecture the Parliament and the people using the sanctity of Parliament on Westminster-style democracy.
I beg to differ. There is no Westminster-style democracy happening in our country.
Yes, but they election.
A Westminster-style democracy would require a proper opposition in Parliament. Not people who won the election and people who lost the election getting together and calling themselves a government. That's not Westminster democracy. Westminster democracy is where you have a coalition opposition that's breathing down the neck. That's what we learned first year in political science. Breathing down the neck of a government, saying, if you fall, I have the right to take over and I can do better than what you're doing.
I have another question from a viewer. Since the arrival of the Parliament government, the lawyers' fees have increased tenfold. The latest now, apparently, is that they charge a block fee, minimum 1.5 million rupees, 15 lakhs. Is this correct? Can't this be regulated so that lawyers do not fleece clients? I
have a fair feeling of who that viewer is, for I think known to both of us.
Right.
But I think that's an incorrect statement. Lawyers are not charging as much as, it depends on the case. There may be a President's Counsel or a very senior counsel who might charge that overall for a case. But that's not the standard. That's not the common. That may be an exception. There are lawyers who go to court for much less, much less. I don't want to talk of fees, but I don't think that's a common, correct assessment at all. But because we are unnecessarily trying to remember, we have to be responsible. We do not dissuade the public from going to courts of law. This is the most important thing.
That's right.
Why do our people end up fighting each other? Why do they take a sword and cut someone's arm off? Because we have discouraged people from going to courts of law to sort their problems out. Either the costs are too high, or the litigation drags on, or the lawyers' fees are too high, or the cases are dragged on. You follow? In a developed setting, anyone with a common grievance, I touch you like that. You have violated my right to privacy, and you will go and sue me. But in our country, people come hammer you on the head. Will they still go to a court of law and sue you? They won't, because they ask, "Ayyo, koti wali galla gatta wage." They hate. We should not discourage people from going to courts of law. Similarly, our lawyers, our justice system needs to gear up. Get our act together. Our legislators need to make regulations to make it healthy for people, citizens, to exercise their rights in courts of law.
That's true. That's a good thing. But can we go back? Where isn't it a good idea? Can you not start a call for school children to be taught the law?
Precisely. as you know, we also engage in several citizens movements. We are open to any invitation from anyone, any school. I'm sure I can gather a few heads, at least for the law part, but I don't think it should be only lawyers for us. It should be all professionals who should, as I said, on the civic duties. All professionals in this country should get together and engage themselves in educating the public of their various professions, accountancy or medicine or economics. Because you see, for us, once again, the few citizens groups that we have operating, I think, is far inferior to the amount of corruption and scandal that's out there in the country. We need more professionals coming. We Sri Lankans like to sit back at home and watch the news and get a few professionals who are, who have nothing. They think we have nothing else to do than shout about everything that is wrong. More people, there needs to be civil empowerment. More people need to come out and get involved in trying to make a better country for ourselves. Not sit at home and let 10 people go and do the job for you.
True, that I quite agree. But our legal lady on our floor reported back from a conference recently in Negombo, in which it was disclosed or highlighted that the criminal justice system here, it can take up to 10 years. I think this was, we're quoting the Attorney General, on average 10 years. That's a long time.
It's a valid concern for us, very valid concern. I do not know how far her research is correct, but certainly it takes long. And may I add one more thing to it? For example, there are, say, minor offences. Say, for example, you go on a bus without a ticket. Or maybe you're caught with a simple possession of some very minute amount of, say, some illegal substance. But a personal amount. Or some little offence, some jumping offence. Or say the imprisonment, term of imprisonment may be 6 months, if you're found guilty. But sometimes for the case to be heard, you end up staying inside in a remand prison for about 2.5 years. So even if you are found guilty, the amount of time you spend would be less than what you have actually served waiting for your trial to be taken up. Which is
that's a real happening, isn't it?
It's a ridiculous state of affairs. We need to do something. Which is why now judges also tend to give bail, because they know that we are not going to be able to conclude this case anytime soon. You follow? So they think, well, we might as well not restrict this, because remember, unless you're proven guilty, you can't, your right to freedom cannot be curtailed. You can't be put in a prison. And so as lawyers, judges are also lawyers who go there. So they know we can't put this man behind a cell and wait for his trial to come up for 2, 3, 4 years, and then even if he's found guilty, if his punishment is only about 2 years, what am I doing to his freedom? So judges also tend to evaluate the two because of these delays and maybe give bail. I'm not trying to justify why bail is given to some top criminals, but still you can't, even if it's top criminal, you can't judge him until he's proven guilty. So he has a right to go out on bail, and therefore the people who misuse the system, the top criminals, as I say, will get bail, go out and commit another offence. It's a vicious cycle, and we need to break this. And once again I say, the legislators that we have sent there should be learned enough to make law. And if they are not learned enough, people must send people who are learned enough to make the law. So we can't complain that.
But it's back to square one, because
back to the people.
To send for the people to send them, they must be given a fair selection.
So why don't the people remember? It's the people that make up these parties also. Correct? The major, say, let's talk the two major parties in this country. They are also made up of citizens. Why don't those citizens demand? Start with your local member. Go to him and say, sir, next time we're not going to vote for you unless you do this and this. Or start from even below that. Don't call him sir. I wouldn't call him sir. I don't think I'll call anyone sir.
With that.
No, I won't call anyone sir. But that's my personal opinion, because we pay them, as you said earlier, some perks coming up to $500,000 not to call them sir, to work for us. But hang on, just 1 minute. The citizens need to demand. Citizens need to demand that the right people are sent into office. Otherwise, we will not vote for you.
Wonderful. On that note, Krishma Wanasuri, thank you very much for being on Newsline. Thank you for watching Newsline. Have a great week ahead, and take care. We'll be here 7 to 7:30, Monday through to Friday. Take care. God bless.
Thank you, Faraz. Thanks, man.